Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, on a beautiful afternoon, first week of January 2024. I'm down here, you're up there. I'm going to try to give you a better perspective while I strip apart this 1979 Trans Am TH350. It's a 6-inch output shaft. Quick sidebar. Late 70s, early 80s, General Motors started painting all the engines from all different brands corporate blue because there were some upset customers. For instance, if you bought a Chevy Nova that was badged as a Cadillac and it had a 305 Chevy engine in it, you might have been disappointed. So they decided to paint all engines corporate blue. I know in the 79 Trans Am, majority of those got a 403 Oldsmobile. This particular one is the 10th anniversary, and they were all painted silver. I've jokingly called it the silver anniversary. If you plot out your marriage anniversaries, 10 years isn't silver. But you know what I mean. That car had a 400 Pontiac, unfortunately a Turbo 350 because that's pretty much all it was. And it had a disc brake rear end. Pretty unique car. Only in the anniversary Trans Am that I'm aware of. Maybe there was other special packages to have. But either way, we're going to see if this is a good core. It's nice and clean on the outside. We're going to strip it apart. Now the TH350, I find myself making comparisons to a Turbo 400. Why wouldn't you? You're normally choosing one or the other. So in this case, I'll be pointing out the differences as we take it apart. So, off camera real quick, I'm just going to take off the peripherals that you don't want to watch me do, the tail housing, the pan, the bracketry, etc., speedometer, governor gear. If there's any highlights, I'll come back. But we'll save the good stuff, the live action, for actual internal work. All you've missed so far is I removed the pan. The pan gasket is the consistency of a potato chip. It's baked right on. You can see most of it's stuck. I had to chisel away what I got off so far. And the pan has got some gray, mung in it, but certainly seen a lot worse, but I believe it was removed and wiped out before I got it. So on the rear, I've already popped the rear seal out before I take the tail housing off. In order to remove the tail housing, the speedometer's in the way. The TH350 had the same treatment as a Turbo 400. It got a few metric bolts and the rest remained standard. The mount bolts into the case, now M10 1.5. The speedometer and the kickdown cable, which is unique to a TH350. It is kick down passing gear. More on that later. You can remove it if you want to. It is not as critical as a 204R or a 700R4 where that runs the entire shift program. TH350 still uses a vacuum modulator if you can see it. And a governor. The governor is a cup. It just is driven in. It's held in with this wire bail. So it pops right off. You wiggle it out of the case. And then you gently have to work your way around without ruining the cover, remove it. So I'm going to gingerly remove the speedo, driven gear, the tail housing, the governor, and the modulator, and I'll be right back. You need to remove the speedometer drive gear. 1 1/4 wrench works better, but if you hold the little tang in, which is right there, and you pop up on it, you can remove it. That was a 1 inch, because it's what I had on the bench. Don't lose your little clip. Every seal I've encountered so far, the governor cover, tail housing, hard as a rock. I mean, you got to figure, 1979, so far, no indication it's been apart. Okay, we're flipped over. This has a Dacron style filter. I prefer the metal one. that the fluid intake is actually on the top. This sucks off the bottom where all the debris is, and these plug easily. This is your kick down cable. There's this much free pedal, and then when you go to wide open throttle, it actually depresses the plunger. Some will argue that this is an input to shift pressure. I've never known that to be true. There's many TH350s we installed by simply cutting off the kickdown cable if it was broken and not needed, and fill it full of silicone, bolt it back in the hole, and remove any linkage that would go to the carburetor. Again, someone argued that. Doesn't matter. Now you can pull the clip, take that out, or you can simply remove the bolt and disconnect it from the outside. If you're removing the transmission from the vehicle, it's a lot easier to leave the cable in the car, so you can't see when I'm taking the bolt out. And you pop this out. It has a clip exactly like that, the same bends on it, and you can work the cable right off the end of it. It just has a hole. Again, it's bent just like that is. Now this will come out with the valve body. Let's take the filter off and throw it away forever. It's bolt-on filter, kind of nice. TH350's only had one depth pan. There never was a deep option from the factory. And it has a gasket as well. It's probably baked on there and broken. The valve body itself, I'm going to remove the valve body first and leave the support plate. In TH350, in the book, they call what I call the separator plate, the spacer plate, and this is a spacer support plate. So all the bolts are 5/16 half-inch hex, and they're all the same length. So you don't have to worry about where they go. It is spring-loaded, so it's going to pop up a little bit. I'm going to maintain a little angle, hopefully catch the fluid, and let's go ahead and take them out. Hand's getting full. I like to leave the ones near the spring for last. I have a feeling the valve body gaskets are going to be baked on as well. And the last one. Here she comes. She's popping up on her own. Gonna leak. So a couple things you got to deal with. You have an S hook here. You can slide the valve body this way. You can tilt and get this out first. Slide it off the S hook, and that'll come with it. Valve body gasket's already broken. And again, it's probably like a potato chip, just like the rest of it. It is. So this is your intermediate band apply servo. We'll take that out. So your check valves are still captive because you left the plate on. Now I'll take these shorter 5/16 bolts out, which are again all the same length. They're all short. So you have long bolts and short bolts. That's all you got to worry about. This has a gasket as well. A lot of the new valve body gaskets are one piece. And this may have been, it's hard to tell because it's broken. So it is dry and crispy. Appears to be unmodified. And this is drastically stuck. And it has Nylon check balls, not magnetic, so I have to fish those out with a screwdriver. Again, my gasket's stuck. There's nothing underneath that I need to remove the gear train out of the transmission on the drums. However, with the intermediate apply servo out, it's a lot easier to deal with the intermediate band. You can do it the other way, but with the intermediate servo out, you can put the forward and direct drum in and then put the band in afterwards with no hassle. A few more points of interest. I've chipped away at the stuck valve body gasket to show you there's a intake filter right here, screen, and there's a governor screen down here in the hole closest to the output shaft that I usually can wiggle out of there. Identical to a TH400. The TH350 uses a nice clip on the linkage instead of a bent nail. That controls your side-to-side movement of the linkage. Now it's free to move back and forth. And we'll go ahead and take the parking pawl guide off. That's odd. The 9/16 headed 5/16 bolt. Interesting. Okay, that's out of the way. We'll continue to remove the linkage afterwards. That's really not that exciting, although it does have to come out. That portable. They're taking the pump bolts out. Another thing I do like about the TH350 is they used all 8 bolts. It takes the same gasket as the Turbo 400. It takes the same SFI bell housing if you cut this one off. So in that respect, you always know you have an 8-bolt case. Let's see how hard the pump's going to come out. A little tight. You should be able to pop it right here. It has a mile of intermediate clutch clearance. Get an idea we have a problem there. So, just like the Turbo 400, there's 2 threaded holes, 3/8 coarse thread. There we go. She gave up. I don't know if you can still see me, but the TH350 is put together a little bit different. Again, I'm comparing it to a Turbo 400. You'll see the back side of the pump contains all the rings for sealing. The intermediate clutch apply piston is part of the back side of the pump. And the first thing you encounter is the intermediate clutches. Let's see. It's a wave plate. And then clutch and steel, there's not that many of them. It depends on what application it was in. I've seen some that only have 2. Pressure plate would go in first when you reassemble it. while they're not smoked, they're definitely discolored. And I saw material stuck in there, so this material here, we're going to find it eventually. Probably band material. Now, like I mentioned, with the, hope you can hear me, with the intermediate band servo removed, we can easily remove the band and reinstall it after. That is definitely toast. Black and missing pieces. Not good. So now, your forward clutch is deeper than the direct clutch. The direct clutch sits on top with an intermediate roller right there, which freewheels the opposite of a 400. This freewheels counterclockwise and locks to clockwise direction. But the intermediate and direct will pull out one piece. And while we're right here, again, I assume you can see me. You don't want to lose all your bearings and spacers. Some model 350s have just a washer on the back of the pump with a tang for end play. Later models have a bearing and a shim. Same bearing we put on the output of a Turbo 400. So this works. I can freewheel to the left, lock to the right. There's a bearing in between the forward and direct. It's in fine shape. So let's just take a look at the clutches while we're right here. Start with the direct. Well, they're black and they're smoked. And it was a 1, 2, well, it's hard to tell you. 1, 2, 3, 4 clutch. But the rest of it looks fine. You know, serviceable, I should say. That came out weak. We'll get to that in a minute. You'll notice how long the input shaft is on the forward clutch because it sits behind the direct drum. It makes it weaker and it's necked down a lot, again, compared to a Turbo 400. In the forward, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clutch. And they're still alive and in good shape. I may as well pop the pump apart while we're right here. The bolts for the pump halves also hold the spring retainer for the intermediate applied piston. The pump is similar to a Turbo 400, but the pressure regulator is in the valve body. So that's your spring retainer, return springs. Early models, you had to stack the springs in individually. Then there was a retainer plate. Later model went to this time-saving device. Intermediate piston just pops right out. Seals are hard as a rock. And let's just take a peek at our wear surfaces. And she's fine. Obviously I'll inspect and measure afterwards, but initial impression, the pump will live on. So the input ring gear, if you noticed, was stuck in the forward clutches. I actually put it back in where it belongs, but it just sits in there. There's a washer on both sides, a metal washer that locks in there. I hope you can see it. And the top has a 3-pronged washer. And thus begins the disassembly of the Geartrain. And much different than a Turbo 400, you have to take it out in pieces. Not really that difficult, but first thing we encounter is a snap ring right there. Take a small pair of snap ring pliers. Be careful. You won't send it across the shop and lose it forever. I'm careful with it because I don't want to have to strip another transmission again. There we go. Very small, got clutch gasket stuck to it, but that's the size of it. Sorry, the UPS man showed up. Next we have our input carrier. Has a captive bearing down inside. You can check the planets. Everything's nice and tight. The sun shell, or sun, for lack of a better term. In the 700s they call it a sun shell, so we'll do the same. It has a thrust washer that's unique. It'll fit right on the low roller clutch. Now we have a big snap ring in the case. Now we got the mailman here. All right, we had the UPS man, the mailman, the school bus, and then the heater kicked on. But now we're back. What we have left in the case for hard parts is a snap ring and what is called the anti-clunk spring. It holds the low roller clutch support, which splines into the case, this piece here. I guess it's supposed to keep it from wearing on the splines of the case or making noise. Anti-clunk spring. I always got a kick out of it. This is where a TH350 is significantly weaker. This is as close as it has to a center support. It's notched into the case and held with a piece of wire and a snap ring. No bolt up through the case. So let's pop it out. The snap ring has to be placed so it misses the anti-clunk spring. I know you can't see me probably, but I will explain when we get her out here. So because of the placement, it's a little bit tricky to get out, but using my two favorite tools. We will win eventually. There it is. That's the snap ring, and it has to, the anti-clunk spring has to be right here. Now to remove the output shaft, the output ring gear, and the low roller clutch support, I just give it a whack on the back and hang on to it, and it should come out. And also the low reverse clutches. So there's a lot going on right here. And yes, the TH350 has a roller output thrust bearing. That's nice. So how do the clutches look here? Come on. It fell apart. We got 1, 2, they're rough, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So far, everything in this transmission is baked. You got to figure, what, 45 years old? Never been a part that I can see. There's no evidence anybody's ever been here before. Check our planets. The low roller clutch should freewheel clockwise and lock counterclockwise. It does. You can disassemble it just by pushing it apart. The anti-clunk spring still in the case. It fits into the case just like that. It sits there, and the snap ring would fit like that, if you can see that. So, not that hard to reassemble. Oh, one more steel. Now, all that's left is the low reverse clutch apply piston, because if you notice, we have low reverse clutches down in the back of the case instead of a rear band. They perform this with a set of clutches instead. To remove that, you need a special tool. The special tool is this. It has two little reduced areas that fit into the snap ring groove. You twist it down, you compress the spring retainer, and there's a fairly thin, but maybe 1 3/4 or 2-inch snap ring in there. So this is somewhat of a frustrating operation, and you probably can't see me anyway, so let me just pop it out and show you the parts. The procedure looks something like this. The tool is down in there. I'll compress the spring. You have a small set of snap rings. You got about one shot at it. It's tiny, it's frustrating, but eventually you'll pop it out of there. Back off the spring retainer. Once again, the later model TH350s have a contained spring. You don't have to pack them individual. That's your snap ring you're dealing with. Now to reinstall this, same procedure, but just save yourself the hassle and just use a couple of screwdrivers and just push this in. If you try to do it with snap ring pliers, it's just frustrating. Now to remove the low reverse piston, we're just going to blow air in the apply hole. So let me go turn on the air just for that operation. Okay, turn the air on. I had to chip out the apply hole, which is this one. These two are governor feeds. We already knew that because we removed the filter. This one's your apply hole. Probably shouldn't stick your face in there when you do it, but in my experience, it's not exactly going to hit the ceiling. So I guess it depends on how hard you blow on it. That should have released it. And there it is. It has 3 straight seals on it. So when you go to put it back in, you have to line up this little tang. I'm dripping on the floor. And you can pretty much push it back in the case after you lube the heck out of it. All right, we're down to a last couple items. This is the 1-2 accumulator. There's a snap ring that holds this cover in. There's a little hole right here. Big enough for a little punch. I'm probably blocking your view. You use that to help me move the snap ring. One snap ring. It's not a massively spring-loaded deal. It's not going to fly away. Sometimes the springs are broken. Let's find out. If we can get it out. It's tapered, so it's hard to grab. He's coming. Just had dirt in the hole. There's a O-ring that seals it. The correct procedure they tell you now is to put the O-ring, instinctively you'd want to put it here. When you reassemble it, they tell you to put it in the groove and push the cover into it. Reality, I've done it both ways and never had a leak. It's possible to leave this out if you want to. Most people don't, or it's an easy way to get a firm shift, but firm 1-2 shift. However, results may vary. It's a lot of black oil in here. This has steel rings on it typically. A lot of dirt in there. A lot of lung. All right, all I have left to do is to remove the nut from the shaft and make sure there's no burrs. Move that out of the case. If you notice, I left the bracket, the external bracket on the shift shaft. It's specific to each vehicle. Obviously this one gonna go back. I do, after I wash it, I put the bracket itself in the vise and I find my success rate on loosening the nut and separating all the pieces so I can clean it all up. Much better than trying to remove the nut right now. It's too flexible when it's installed. So I go ahead and take it out, put it in the vise, the bracket, and then I can focus on the nut. Nothing's flexing, it comes right out. Unique to the TH350, that is not repeated on a lot of GM transmissions, you have a line pressure tap right there, 1/8 inch pipe. That's common. However, in the TH350, this is the 1-2 shift pressure, and this is 2-3. So 1-2, 2-3. In a Turbo 400, for instance, you have just the main line, and if you watch it, if you have a leak inside the transmission, you'll watch all the main line pressure drop. In this one, in theory, you can actually watch the pressure when it shifts. So interesting. Again, not repeated on many transmissions. Not sure why they chose to do this one, but they did. So, all right, it's Friday night. School bus has already been here. I'm going to go up in the house and think about anything but TH350s. I don't hate them, but I don't necessarily like them either. But they serve a purpose. They're compact, 3-speed, somewhat reliable. This is a rare one that all the hard parts appear to be usable because it's still on its first life, if you will. Most of these got pressed back into service in the 80s when the 700R4 wouldn't work. We converted them back to 350s. Took all the TH350s from the 69 on up through the 70s, rebuilt them and put them back in vehicles, and they had a second life. So if you're looking at a core TH350, it's pretty rare. It hasn't been around the world at least once. So looking at it in that respect, you know, I guess they did a good job. Have a nice evening. Take her easy.